On the day of my wedding, my fiancée, Sarah, 32, left me for my brother Mark, 40, with the full support of my parents. I, 35, went through what was undoubtedly the worst day of my life 2 years ago. Just an hour before the ceremony, Sarah called to say she couldn't go through with the wedding. The real blow came when I learned, to my shock, that she had been secretly involved with my brother and that our parents had been backing their relationship the entire time. Now, Sarah seeks help for dealing with her husband's controlling behavior. Ethan stood in front of the mirror, his heart racing as he adjusted his tie for the umpteenth time. The sun poured through the hotel window, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside him. Today was meant to be the happiest day of his life, a celebration of love and commitment. He was about to marry Sarah, the woman he had envisioned a future with for the past 5 years. They had meticulously planned every detail of their wedding, from the picturesque vineyard venue to the carefully curated guest list. As he glanced at the reflection staring back at him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He brushed aside the nagging doubts, reminding himself that nerves were normal before such a monumental occasion. After all, he had everything he had ever wanted: a successful career as a senior software engineer, a beautiful home in a desirable neighborhood, and a fiancée who seemed to be his perfect match. But as he took a deep breath, preparing to step into the next chapter of his life, he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Little did he know, the day would unravel in ways he could never have imagined, leading him down a path of betrayal and heartbreak that would change everything. Just as he was about to leave the room, his phone buzzed, shattering the momentary calm. It was Sarah. Ethan answered, expecting her to be as excited as he was. Instead, her voice was cold and distant. "Ethan, I can't marry you," she said, the words slicing through him like a knife. "What do you mean you can't?" he stammered, confusion and panic flooding his mind. "I just can't. I've been seeing someone else," she confessed, her tone devoid of the warmth he had always known. Ethan's heart sank. "Who?" he asked. "Your brother, Mark," she replied, her voice steady. The world around him blurred as he struggled to process her words. Mark, the brother he had always looked up to, the one who had seemingly done everything right in their parents' eyes. How could this be happening? As Sarah continued to speak, explaining how their relationship had developed behind his back, Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. The wedding he had dreamed of was slipping away, replaced by a nightmare he never saw coming. When Ethan arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was charged with confusion and disbelief. Guests who had come to celebrate were now left to navigate the fallout of a wedding that would never happen. His parents, instead of offering support, were busy managing the chaos, their expressions a mix of concern and guilt. "Ethan, I am so sorry," his mother, Linda, said, but her eyes darted to Mark, who stood nearby, looking smug. "We didn't know it would come to this." "Didn't know?" Ethan shot back, anger boiling over. "You knew, you supported them." His father, Robert, stepped in, trying to defuse the situation. "Let's not make this worse, son. We can talk about this later." But Ethan was beyond reason. He felt betrayed not just by Sarah, but by the very people who were supposed to love him unconditionally. The hours that followed were a blur of canceled vendors, confused guests, and pitying glances. As he sat in a back room, still dressed in his wedding suit, he tried to comprehend how his life had unraveled so quickly. The laughter and joy that had filled the air just moments before were replaced by whispers and awkward silence. Friends and family members who had come to celebrate were now left to navigate the fallout of a wedding that would never happen. In the days that followed, Ethan struggled to come to terms with the betrayal. He found solace in his work, throwing himself into projects to distract himself from the pain. He also sought therapy, hoping to untangle the mess of emotions that had taken over his life. It was during these sessions that he began to understand the patterns of his past, the way his family dynamics had shaped his self-worth, and how he had allowed himself to be manipulated by those he loved. As time passed, he started to rebuild his life. He focused on his career, made new friends, and even explored new hobbies. He learned to set boundaries, to prioritize his own needs, and to recognize his worth outside of his relationships. The journey was not easy, but with each step he felt a little more like himself again. Months later, he received a message from Sarah. She wanted to meet and talk. He hesitated, unsure if he was ready to face her again. But he also knew that he needed closure. When they finally met, she looked different, vulnerable, and regretful. She apologized for her actions, explaining how she had been caught up in a whirlwind of emotions and had made choices that hurt him deep. Ethan listened, his heart heavy with the weight of their shared history. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I was confused, and I let my feelings for Mark cloud my judgment." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger and sympathy. "You didn't just hurt me, Sarah. You betrayed my trust and shattered the future we had planned together. I thought we were building a life together, and then you chose my brother." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I know, I can't change what happened, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry. I've realized how much I've lost." As they talked, Ethan felt a sense of closure beginning to wash over him. He recognized that while Sarah had been a significant part of his life, he had moved on. He had grown stronger and more resilient in the face of betrayal. "I appreciate your apology, but I need to focus on my own healing now," he said firmly. "I wish you well, but I can't be part of your life anymore." With that, they parted ways, and Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had faced the past and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future without the burden of unresolved feeling. Weeks later, Ethan received a letter from his parents. It was unexpected and filled with regret. They expressed their sorrow for how things had turned out and asked for his help in dealing with Mark, who had become increasingly erratic and abusive towards Sarah. Ethan's heart raced as he read their words. He felt a mix of anger and concern. How could they ask for his help after everything that had happened? They had chosen Mark over him, and now they wanted him to step in and save the very person who had betrayed him. He spent days contemplating the letter, wrestling with his emotions. Part of him wanted to help Sarah, to ensure she and her child were safe, but another part of him felt that he would be betraying himself by getting involved again. Ultimately, he decided to take action. He reached out to a local support group for victims of domestic abuse, gathering information on how to report Mark's behavior anonymously. It was a difficult decision, but he knew it was the right one. When Ethan finally confronted his parents about the situation, the meeting was tense. They had gathered at a cafe, and the air was thick with unspoken words. "Ethan, we're so glad you came," his mother said, her voice shaking. "I am here because I want to understand what's happening with Mark and Sarah," he replied, keeping his tone steady. His father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We didn't realize how serious things had gotten. We thought they were just going through a rough patch." Ethan felt his anger bubbling to the surface. "A rough patch? Mark is abusive. You can't just ignore that because he's your son. You need to take responsibility for your part in this." The conversation escalated, with Ethan standing firm in his convictions. He expressed his feelings of betrayal and abandonment, making it clear that he would not be manipulated or used as a pawn in their family drama. In that moment, Ethan realized that he had finally found his voice. He was no longer the passive brother who accepted the favoritism and neglect. He was a man who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, ready to stand up for himself and those who needed help. Just when Ethan thought he had put the past behind him, Sarah showed up at his apartment one evening. She looked different, vulnerable, and weary. "Ethan, can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, memories of their past flooding back. "What do you want, Sarah?" "I need your help," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Mark is getting worse, and I am scared for my child. I don't know what to do." Ethan felt a surge of conflicting emotions. He wanted to help her, but he also felt the sting of betrayal. "You made your choices, Sarah. You chose him over me." "I know, and I regret it every day," she replied, her voice breaking. "But I am asking for your help now. I can't do this alone." As they talked, Ethan listened to her fears and concerns. He could see the desperation in her eyes, and despite everything, a part of him still cared for her. "I'll help you," he finally said, "but on my terms. I won't be involved with. I'll help you find resources and support, but you need to take the first step to protect yourself and your child." As the weeks passed, Ethan continued to support Sarah from a distance, checking in on her progress and ensuring she was taking the necessary steps to leave Mark. His friends rallied around him, offering encouragement and reminding him of his strength. One evening, while out with friends, Ethan learned about Mark's escalating behavior. Rumors circulated that he had become increasingly volatile, and Sarah was in a precarious situation. Ethan felt a moral dilemma weighing heavily on his conscience. He knew he had to act. After a long night of deliberation, he decided to report Mark's abusive behavior anonymously. It was a difficult choice, but he prioritized the safety of Sarah and her child over his own feelings of resentment. The fallout from Ethan's decision was swift. Mark found out about the report and confronted Ethan, his anger palpable. "You think you can just ruin my life and get away with it?" he shouted, his face twisted in rage. Ethan stood his ground, refusing to back down. "I did what I had to do to protect Sarah and her child. You need help, Mark, and I won't let you hurt them anymore." The confrontation escalated, and Ethan felt the weight of his family's expectations bearing down on him. His parents were furious, blaming him for the rift in the family and siding with Mark. "Why would you do this to your brother?" his mother demanded, her voice laced with disappointment. "He's family." Ethan felt a surge of anger. "Family doesn't hurt each other, Mom. I am done being the scapegoat in this family. I am choosing to stand up for what's right." In the aftermath of the confrontation, Ethan found solace in his decision. He had chosen to prioritize his values over familial loyalty, and it felt liberating. He distanced himself from his parents and Mark, focusing on his own healing and growth. As time passed, Ethan embraced his new life. He poured himself into his work, took up new hobbies, and built a supportive network of friends who uplifted him. He learned to let go of the past and the pain of betrayal, finding strength in his resilience. One day, while reflecting on his journey, Ethan realized that he had transformed. He was no longer the man who allowed others to dictate his worth. He had reclaimed his life, and for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about the future. The story concludes with Ethan standing on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the horizon. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that he had faced his demons and emerged stronger. Ethan had learned that betrayal, while painful, could lead to growth and self-discovery. He was ready to embrace new beginnings, to forge his own path, and to live life on his own terms. With a renewed sense of purpose, he looked forward to the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.